Hey, what's up everybody? In today's video we are going to be working on an enclosure for my 3D printer. My 3D printer itself is a Monoprice Maker Select V2. It's the kind of larger version. There's a really tiny compact one, and then the one I have, it was a fairly inexpensive printer, and to be quite honest, I've been having plenty of trouble with it over the last couple months. And I've kind of put it in a state of kind of disuse for a little bit, especially after getting my mill and doing a lot of stuff with beetle weights and bigger bots. I didn't have as much opportunity or reason to be using the 3D printer. But my new robot is an ant weight, and I think 3D printing the chassis is the correct way to go, and I think what I really want is for this thing to be made out of ABS. And printing ABS requires a consistent temperature, and in my condo I didn't really have a better place to put my 3D printer besides either basically near my kitchen counter. It was either on the counter or it was on the other side of it on a small table. And that just happens to be near the air exchange. There's vents everywhere that blow, and you can kind of tell as soon as the air conditioner kicked on, usually I'd start noticing the layers didn't look quite as nice as they should have been. So I'm going to go through the process of building a fairly inexpensive container for this printer. My goal in making it is to use mostly stuff I have around the house, and really mostly stuff from Ikea. My basic starting block was 2 of the LAC coffee tables or side tables, and a lot of the hardware mounting brackets that I started using with it were extra stuff from various furniture bits that I just scavenged out of a jar I threw it in. So let's take a look at the process. I started out by tracing the tables onto a sheet of MDF I had lying around from the Antweight Arena build last fall. Then I cut 3 panels out with my jigsaw. These will become the walls of the enclosure. I scrounged through my coffee can of random furniture hardware and selected several angle brackets from some Ikea shelves, and then I wedged the walls in place and proceeded to figure out where the brackets would go. I cleaned out the edge of the MDF with some high grit sandpaper and then started to drill and install the brackets. I hit all 3 walls with a coat of primer, followed by a coat of black paint, and then I realized I was actually out of hardware and had to actually buy some. I then began final assembly of the walls. The walls were gently massaged into alignment and then fixed in place. The edges were sealed with some aluminum tape to help hold the heat in. Then 4 holes were drilled shallowly into the front of the enclosure and sanded to clean them up. Magnets were glued onto the holes and matched with steel washers, and then the washers were glued to a sheet of acrylic I had bought for a much worse enclosure attempt a few years back. Handles were glued to the outside of the acrylic so the sheet could be moved on and off the enclosure as needed, and then additional magnets were attached to either side of the enclosure to hold various tools for the printer. The filament spool was mounted to the top of the enclosure, and a hole was drilled to allow the filament to pass into the chamber. Plastic eyelets were installed in the hole to prevent the filament from rubbing on the rough wood. The control box was mounted, poorly, to the side of the enclosure using more brackets and MDF. This needs to be fixed later. A light was then added to the chamber so I can actually see what I'm printing. So unfortunately that's where this project ends for the time being. I started to do a test print, somehow thinking this would make everything go perfectly smoothly, and forgot that I was still needing to figure out some problems I'm having with the printer itself. I think some of them are actually more in my slicing program than they are to do with the printer itself. I just need to play with the settings, and I quite honestly haven't had time to really mess with it. And I've been itching to get a video because it's been way too long since I put one out. So I'm just gonna call it here and just have it be about the enclosure itself, and I'll get to the 3D printing a little bit later. But I'm pretty happy with this. I think it came out decent. It doesn't look nearly as ugly as I thought it would, though it is a giant black box in basically the entry hall of my home. And I didn't mention this in the audio commentary, but it is just on another of its own kind of table. So it's an Ikea LAC table stacked on top of an Ikea LAC table. Theoretically, you could just pile these things to the ceiling, I guess, and have, you know, whatever height you want. This seems okay. I may add another table to the bottom just to bring it up so I'm not having to bend down to get everything in and out of the front of the chamber. But for now, I'm good with this, and I'm gonna hopefully get it up and running sooner than later. So that's it for now on this. I will see you guys in the next video. Later.